hit go live. All right. So this thing says we're live on YouTube. So meeting is now. Hey, hello everyone. I hope somebody is there. We are just waiting. Let's see if people are able to find us. We're a couple minutes behind schedule. It's kind of interesting planning this. Let's see. That's the one from earlier. So we're on YouTube live right now. This is not Facebook. Okay, I see ourselves. There we are. Here we are. And so we're on YouTube live right now. This is not, that is working. That's me. Facebook.
You're talking over yourself. It's impressive. Yeah. It's great.
I'm watching and commenting on
13 seconds ago.
I know, right? Yeah. So just I was just trying to check and see how do you find out when there's somebody on there as well. But maybe
I think YouTube shows viewers somewhere.
It's our first time doing a live Zoom call, and I wonder if you could even edit this afterwards and cut the beginning, but I guess we'll find out.
YouTube. Oh, it says 2 watching.
2 watching. Okay. Well,
one of them's you.
One of them is me. Are you watching also?
No.
All right. So, yeah, let's. You know what? It's probably a little harder for people to find it on YouTube than Facebook, because Facebook you're browsing,
right?
But on YouTube you have to go specifically.
Well, it popped up on my. I think because I'm subscribed, it popped up on my recommended.
Oh, it does?
Yeah, notification probably.
Okay. Well, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. So, anyways, let's get going, because I think a lot of people will watch this afterwards anyways, you know.
Right.
Getting some messages earlier saying what time is this going to be, so maybe some are going to watch it after work and stuff. But I really just wanted to, you know, we've been doing a lot of live streamings, and we've been doing a lot of calls, and just keeping people encouraged and keeping people you know, anchored in hope and what hope really is. And and one of the biggest themes of my life has been worship, you know, and the importance of worship. And I know for you guys as well, you know, we've known each other for a long time, and I just I love you guys' heart on worship and your passion and all that. So I wanted to hear from you guys, you know, through the turmoil in the world and all that stuff, without having to talk too much about that stinking virus that I'm so tired of, you know. But mostly on our end, you know, because we're not just we're not really supposed to be in a defensive place. We have victory already in Jesus. But you know, how does worship help us, you know, not just get through this, but also, you know, just in our daily lives and in a practical way? So I'm going to kind of leave that open-ended question and let you guys go ahead.
Yeah, I want to start. I want to read just a verse really quick. One of my favorite verses is Romans chapter 12 and verse 1. This is NLT, and it says, and so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all he has done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind he will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him. And it says in verse 2, don't copy the behavior and customs of the world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn how to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. And I think, to me, I think those 2 verses are connected. Obviously, I think, you know, we know that in the original letter, there was no chapter or verse separations. It was all just one kind of idea being shared from Paul to the church in Rome. And so I think the idea of worshiping in a way that is holy and or that is pleasing, that is acceptable, and also not being conformed to the world, but letting God transform us. I think those 2 ideas are connected. So I think that's the first thing, is that as we are kind of recognizing that we shouldn't be responding the same way that the world is, we shouldn't have the same mindset that the world has, we shouldn't be trusting in the same things that the world trusts in. How do we do that practically? How do we, I've always been a fan of really practical things. I think a lot of times, especially in philosophy or in religion or in Christianity, there's a lot of ideas and a lot of things like, oh, we need to be transformed. We need to have the heart of Christ. We need to have peace. We need to live in rest. Okay, but how do you do that? What do you actually do every day to try to maintain that? And I think that can be hard to kind of wrap our minds around. So I think worship is one of those things. But you can just jump if you want.
Oh. Love it. That is so good. Yeah. How about you, Maria?
I feel like it's so easy, I think, during this time, for us to be worried or to really, our focus can tend to be turned towards the things that are going on. But what I think is so great is this is a great time to be able to, even though we feel like maybe we're stuck at home, but we can use this time to really focus on worship and, focus on our time with God. And so I think that, it's all about perspective and how you look at it and how you're speaking and how you're handling that. And, the truth is that if you're showing worship, if you're expressing worship and everything, because I think sometimes people can think that it's just when we go to church on Sunday and, either we're on the stage or in the congregation, that's when we express worship, but actually it's in everything that we do, right? I mean, it's in we express it in so many different ways. It's not just singing a song, right? It's not just doing that. But I think that what's great is that, right now we can be an example to our family members, to our children, to, the people around us. And so I think that this is a good way for us to change our mindset, the way that we're thinking, and thinking that we only worship on Sundays or on Wednesdays or whenever our church service is. But instead, it brings us back to the fact that we need to be worshiping at all times, even in simple things.
Yeah, I think worship starts with approaching things with a different mindset, approaching things with the mindset of God is in control and I'm his child, I'm part of his kingdom, and things may be shaking. The Bible says everything that can be shaken will be shaken. So don't be surprised when things start shaking. That's a promise. But we know that the kingdom of God is not shaken. His throne is not shaken. He's not shaken. He's stable. He's confident. He knows what's going to happen. He's not upset by this or wondering, oh, how am I going to take care of my people? I have to figure this out. Maybe the government can send me a stimulus check. God's not needing that. He's good. He can take care of us.
That's awesome. I love that. It makes me think of King David, and King David would say in the Psalms, magnify the Lord, O my soul. And that word magnify, it resonates so much with me in times like this, because it is so easy to magnify anything else, right? And what is magnify? I mean, magnified is not just like, oh, hail, this thing or that thing, but magnify is whatever you're thinking on and speaking most about, right? You could say that somebody worships somebody because of how much they speak or they talk or they look up to or think about that one person or artist or whatever, right? So in the same way, if we're thinking so much about, the virus and the evil and the things happening, it's like we're kind of worshiping it in a way, and we're magnifying it because we're dwelling so much on it, because we're talking about it so much. And you would say, well, but I'm not talking about good things about it, right? But you're still dwelling on it. You're magnifying it.
Yes.
Magnifying the very other thing that is our salvation.
Yeah. I think I don't want to get too heavy, but we think about the word idolatry and we think of statues and we think of chickens and we think of like some kind of third world country where tribes are still offering sacrifices of animals to idols. We think, well, I'm not doing that, so I must not be engaged in idolatry. And I'll never forget a quote from, there's a pastor from Africa that came to the United States, and he said I have trouble with the United States because of the constant idolatry that's everywhere. And we would say, we don't have statues on the corners of streets. We don't have that. But idolatry is anything that you put in God's place. You say, this is the thing that I put my trust in. And sometimes, like you said, that can be a negative thing. There's lots of people putting their trust in the negative. In fact, I think that happens more often than positive things, especially in our society with the way that social media works, and the way that news works. The power of clicks and ratings and likes, and it can magnify the negative. And you can say, this thing is big. This is, my eyes are fixed on this. I'm looking towards this. I'm expecting something from this. And my thoughts and my emotions and my words are wrapped up in this all the time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's it's exactly the same. And I don't think it's getting heavy on it. I think it's very real, and it's very true. It's idolatry,
Yeah.
It's really,
I don't want to bring condemnation. Like somebody's like, oh my God, I do it. I'm an idolater. but sometimes we have to call things what they are, though, so we can recognize, oh, the Bible does talk about this and talks about how to deal with this. It's not something that, oh, the Bible's an old book and has nothing to say about these issues. No. The Bible has a lot to say about these issues. We just have to recognize what they are and call them what they are.
Absolutely. So, and then something really crazy about worship is, I'm sure you guys would agree with this, is that which you worship, you assimilate, like you become like that which you worship, right? So, again, if you're magnifying fear, if you're magnifying sickness, if you're magnifying the problems and all this stuff, you're going to absorb some of this stuff, and you're going to start reflecting it yourself, right? But that's what the Bible tells us. The more we gaze upon him, the more like him we become. And what is gazing upon Jesus? What is gazing upon him? And but other than worship, right? Like you're like the Bible says that the angels are in awe of God's glory, and they surround the throne. And it's like they're in worship, they're in awe of it. So that which we behold, we become, because we are to be a reflection of Jesus. So worship, I think, is such a crucial part of any believer's way of showing Jesus to anybody around,
and becoming more like Jesus.
Yeah, that's right.
I think that a good way to look at it is, kind of how an example like I could put is when you're driving, and say you're driving and you see this, it's nighttime, and you see this light on the other side of the road, and you're staring at that light. You don't realize that your car is actually going that way, right? You don't realize that you're going that way, but that's because that's where your focus is. So wherever your focus is where you're going to be headed towards, is where you're going to be focused on, is where you're going to be going towards, whether you mean to or not.
Yeah.
And so it's, changing that mindset, changing what you're looking at. So it's not that you're not trying to focus on God, but then there's this like shiny thing, this light over here that's brighter, that's like, that you're more focused on. And so you think that you're, it makes it harder to go towards God or go towards those positive things, because you're
stay on the road you're supposed to be on.
And staying straight. Instead, you're going and you're veering off because you're so focused on this bright, shiny thing, that's like the best way to say it is like, it's not like you're meaning to, that's just the natural thing, is that you're just like, oh, and then you just start going that way. Mm-hmm. But like, if we're able to recognize and say, wait a second, this is just something flashy over here, but this isn't what my main thing I should be focusing on. And we turn straight and we look towards God, then you can start going straight again. And it's like, there's not going to be, you're not going to be going off the road, if you want.
That's so good. Yeah. That's really good. What else you got, Dan?
I've got a lot of, how long are we going?
Let's go until we have 1,000 people watching.
So all night. No.
I think what to kind of piggyback off of what Maria was saying in that verse in Romans, it talks about how letting God transform us into a new person, change the way we think, so we can learn what God's will for us is, which is good and pleasing and perfect. I think one of the most important things you can know in any kind of stressful situation, any kind of conflict, any kind of situation that's tense, that has stress associated with it, anxiety associated with it, is knowing what is God saying, what is God thinking, what's going on in the kingdom of God in this situation. Because we can start thinking about, these are my plans, this is what I'm going to do, this is how I'm going to handle it, this is what I think is going to happen. But in the end, what God thinks is going to happen, what God is saying. That's what's going to get us through this. And I think worship is great because it helps us tune in to what God is saying. I believe that God is always speaking. God doesn't like take a break from speaking. He doesn't only speak in certain times. It's just that we're only tuned in at certain times. You know, the radio station right now is broadcasting, but I have nothing tuned into it, so I don't know what's being said. In the same way, God is speaking all the time, and you can have the radio on and have the dial close, but you know, this is like old school, like back when you used to have the little knob on your car and you tune into the station, right? This is like I'm aging myself here, but when you're close but not quite there, it doesn't come through and you can't really hear it, and you're saying God isn't speaking. What is God saying? I'm not sure. I can't tell. When really all we need to do is just tune in a little bit, tune our antenna a little bit, allow ourselves to connect with what he's saying. And worship does that because it helps us fix our eyes on him, and helps us to see him, and helps us to align our spirit and our heart. You know, because when we're in anxiety, when we're in stress, our emotions and our flesh likes to take the driver's seat, likes to take over and say, oh my God, panic. Oh no, go out and buy toilet paper. Oh no, go out and buy ammo. Oh no, go out and buy food. Oh no, how are you going to survive? How are you going to pay your bills? You got to figure something out. You should stay up all night. You should, pace the floor, and our emotions take over. But when we start worshiping, we're saying, okay, I'm aligning I'm putting my spirit in the driver's seat, and my spirit's connected with God. My spirit hears what God is saying. I'm saying, okay, I'm listening to my spirit, and emotions, I know you're there, but I'm not listening to you. You're not in charge right now. Instead, I'm going to put my focus on God, allow my spirit to connect with his spirit so we can be in alignment, because God is in peace. God isn't stressed. God is in provision. God is in victory. And so when my spirit aligns with his spirit, I'm in peace. I'm in victory, and I'm not stressed because I know what he's saying. And worship is such a practical way to do that. And I really mean, listen, I totally believe in like Maria said, worshiping in all you do. But I think there's power in taking time and saying, I'm going to sing a song to the Lord. And I know that not everybody's a singer, but that doesn't matter. It's not about how good a singer you are. It's not about, whether you're a musical person or not. There's when the Bible talks about worship, it talks about music. It's not something that we just invented in the US, that Hillsong invented, and now we just copied it. Like, this is something that's been going on since the very beginning since there was people of God, since Abraham, since Moses. They would sing songs to God. And it may seem odd, and I know sometimes people push back on that and say, well, not everybody has to be musical, but I think there's something about singing a song, especially a song from your heart, that communicates what you're going through, or communicates what you're feeling to God. I think that's very powerful. And I think it, again, when we do that, it aligns us. It helps us tune in. It helps us to see, okay, I'm not thinking about, because it's hard to worship God and be thinking about what's on the news. It's hard to worship God and be thinking about, what's scary happening in the world, whether it's this or something else. There's always going to be something scary happening in the world. It's just because news needs ratings, so they're going to tell you all the scary stuff. But when you say no, I'm going to worship. I would just encourage everybody watching, take 5 minutes, take your favorite song. I don't care if it's something super simple. It doesn't have anything complicated, and just sing to God. Just sing about how good he is. Think about how thankful you are. Think about how great his love is. Think about how he's in charge and he's overcome the world. Think about all those things. I think you'd be amazed at how quickly suddenly there's just peace, and you find a sense of, okay, you know what? I think we're actually going to make it.
I think that is super powerful because it's like you said, there's something always trying to get your attention. There's always something is fighting for your attention, but you need to make the intentional change to tune in. And worship is the key. Worship is the key to the presence of God, but worship is the key to tune in to God's voice, because you're constantly turning your thoughts, your affection, and even your mouth, right, towards giving God the attention and magnifying him. So if anything else is trying to steal your attention, if anything else is fighting for your attention, like, no, listen to me, you need to be scared, listen to me, I'm really scary, I'm gonna harm you. Worship just like you said, it aligns us back to, no, magnify the Lord of my soul, do not forget any of his benefits. Like,
Yeah.
he is still above all things. He's still the King of Kings. He's still the one sitting on the throne. He's still like, it totally, I love that picture you just painted. It's like, it's tuning us back in, but it's aligning us back to him. And through worship, we can also hear his voice because our attention is back on him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's something that, it doesn't have to just be you. You can even encourage, if you have children, like everyone, I don't know, goes to their room and picks their favorite song, and they, you take that time, and then, or you come together as a family, and whatever your favorite songs are, you listen to those songs and you just focus. It's a good time to worship and to pray and just put your focus on God. And it doesn't have to be for 23 of 24 hours a day. I mean, you can have breakthrough in, the first, chorus of a song or whatever it is. But I think that what we've experienced, and I mean, most of us have, but is that there's just so much breakthrough in worship. There's just so much connection to God in worship. I mean, there's a reason why in battles that the worshipers would go out first. I mean, there's a reason why, because there's power. And, not to like upset anybody, but there's power when you actually speak the words and you actually sing the words or say the words, than just like, oh, I'm worshiping in my heart. And that's kind of a big thing for us. You hear that a lot, I'm worshiping in my heart. No, when you actually speak, there's so much more power than just holding it inside. And so I feel like, that would be something I would challenge people to do is, I don't care if you feel embarrassed, go to your car and do it. I don't know, like wherever it is, but you need to speak it out, because as you do that, it's going to get easier, and you're like, oh, and you're going to feel a difference. And so I just feel like, this is a time that, you can be connecting with God. You're going out and you're fighting this battle, but just through worship, you're worshiping. And as you do that, you're going to go from one song to two songs to three songs before you know it. And then there's just this connection that happens. And like Dan said, God can be speaking to you in that time. Mm-hmm. But I think that, it's something that everyone in your family can do, which is so great, and then you can also, be having that experience of just like, okay, I just opened my mouth and spoke these words, and now look what's happening. Like you'll feel a difference, I guess is my point.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe, we're created in the image of God, and God created the universe by speaking.
Right.
He didn't create it with thoughts in his heart. He spoke words out loud, and that created the universe. And I think when we speak words out loud, it's creative. It impacts something. Now, we're not God, so it's not like you can't, speak and it instantly, sometimes happens. Sometimes we have to keep speaking, but I think there's power in our words. There's power when we speak.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you guys. And I've seen that in my life so many times, like, it's through worship that worship changes the environment, right?
Yeah.
The Bible says that he inhabits the praise of his people. So there's something powerful about worship. It's like prayer. It takes humility to pray, and it also takes humility to worship and say, above everything, there's something more powerful about all this stuff, about myself and my own concerns. There's something more powerful. There's something higher, and yes, God, and it's Jesus, and it's him, and that's just switching our affection and switching our thoughts and everything, just focusing it on him. And that's the power of worship, and I believe that it's what we feel as when we say, oh my gosh, is the presence of God, right? It's like you're attracting heaven. You're starting to, release the presence of God in your own midst. And it's not something that just happens in church when there's a lot of us there, but like Maria was saying, it's something that you can do in your own home. You can do in your own car. You can do, like, the Bible is very clear. It says, call unto me and I will answer. Like, God is always speaking. Like Dan, you were just saying a minute ago, God's always speaking. Are we tuning in or are we not? Are we many things are the things that are screaming for our attention, or the things that are screaming, ooh, I'm scary? Or are we taking our thoughts and turning them towards God. And it's not just thinking about that, but it's like you were saying, Maria, just worshiping, like actually, entering into, like, I'm going to sing a song and I'm going to praise the Lord. I'm going to do like King David said, and I'm going to tell my soul, praise the Lord. Why are you downcast? Why are you scared? Like, no, we're going to worship God. And there's something powerful when you do that every time, whether you're by yourself or whether you're with family or whether you're, with 5 people, or right now, like everybody's at home, maybe with just a couple other people. Like it doesn't matter. The presence of God will come and will manifest. He's with us always, but people get funny about words sometimes, but you know what I mean, right? It will manifest, like it will
when
bring
you sense it, it's different. When you know he's there, it's different than when you don't.
Yeah. So go ahead, Maria.
Okay, so I just felt like to say, but I feel like what's I want to just remind everybody is, even though things feel like they're changing around, and you touched on this in the beginning, but I think it's good to touch on it again, is that God's not changing. So, circumstance is not changing it. He's still peace. He's still love. He's still hope. He's still joy. He's still the provider. All these things, all the words that there are for him, he is still those things.
Yeah.
And so I think it can be so easy, and I'm included, where, I'm like, well, I was really hoping for this in something in my life and it didn't happen. And then it's like someone reminded me, well, your circumstance doesn't change God. What you're in doesn't change God. And so I just felt like to say that, it doesn't matter what your circumstance is. It doesn't matter that, we all are going through this, in our own way, but together, God has not changed. And so, some people can be like angry. I feel like some people might be angry at God or blaming God, but, the truth is that he's never changing, and he's always love. He always brings good things and only good things. And so just to be reminded of that. So I feel like, maybe there's people that have struggled to even worship or even pray to God or during this time, because you feel like, oh, why is this happening? Why are you allowing this to happen? But the truth is God doesn't change. And so I feel like as you can break through that and maybe to start to pray a little and start to worship more, you're going to, just feel a release from that. I just feel like there's like going to be a release from that, and just realizing that, God is not changing. He stays the same. Yeah. So no matter our circumstances now or in the future, or what happened in the past, it doesn't matter, because God is still the same. And so I don't know. I just felt like I needed to.
Yeah. No, it reminds me of, I feel like I want to break some religious chains off of people, because I think of the story of Jacob, where Jacob is fleeing from his brother. And the Bible says that an angel of the Lord came, or I think it says it was the Lord. And I have to look at the verse again, but Jacob wrestles with him. He fights him, right? Sometimes I think we feel like when we go to worship, we have to have, the religious words. We have to say, oh, thank you, Lord. I love you, Lord. And those are the only things that are allowed. When you read some of David's Psalms, they start out with, God, why do my enemies always win? God, where are you when these armies are? God, what's going on when bad stuff happens to me? God, where are you? He starts from wherever he's at. And you might find yourself at a place that's angry, or that's depressed, or that's, stressed, or that's worried. And that's okay. You can start there. In fact, I would encourage you, the Bible says to give, give your bodies to God, because of all he's done for you. This will be living and holy sacrifice. Wherever you're at, wherever you are, bring that whole, all of you to God. He can handle it. He can handle your stress. He can handle your anger. He can handle you if you're just freaking out. And I would encourage you, start there. And as you start to give that to God, you'll find that you can get yourself, and he'll help you get to a place that changes. And you watch in David's Psalms, he starts out sometimes really negative, sometimes really upset. But he always ends up with, but God, you're good, and you're faithful, and you're never gonna let me down. I know that you're gonna see me through. And it's okay to start in that place. Don't feel like you've got to you've got to get yourself to a good place, then come and worship God. No, when you're a mess, when you're just falling apart, go to God, dump all that out, vent all that to him. That's okay. He's big enough and strong enough to handle that. And I think you'll find that as you do that, he'll bring you to a place of, you know what, God, you're good, and you love me, and you're going to see me through. And I think that's really important.
I love that. That is so good, and it's so true. I love that you said I want to break some religious shackles because it is so true. Sometimes we feel like we need to be super proper and super like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go pray right now. So let
Gotta
me
be
see.
buttoned up. I gotta get my church clothes on because I'm gonna pray and God's gonna see me.
It's like we're not being real with God,
Yeah.
as if he didn't know what was really going on in here
Yeah.
Yeah.
and what we just thought, a minute ago, and it's so true because it's a great example in the Bible. King David, some of these Psalms are very dark, and I love what Bill Johnson says. He says, when you feel like you're in turmoil and you can't find the answer to your prayer or to your question or what you're looking for, he says, start reading the Psalms until you find your voice.
Yeah.
And I've done it before because I didn't understand what he meant. And I'm like, okay. And I'll start reading it and I'm like, all of a sudden you find your voice. You go, wait a minute. Like I'm feeling some of these
That's
dark
what I'm doing.
thoughts
Yeah.
right now, right? And then you realize like, okay, it's all right to be real with God because he already knows, and who else can I go to be real? And if that's where you start off, then that's great, as long as you're coming close, because in the end, you always realize and remember, like, he's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the great thing is that it shows, as an example, even in the Psalms, that he started off upset, but he always ended up praising or saying something good or realizing. So I think that's where it comes down to is it's okay to come to God, bring your anger, your frustration, but you don't want to stay there, right? We don't want to stay there. We don't want to stay on that for days and weeks and months. And instead we want to be able to, you bring it to God, then you're praying or you're worshiping and you're going to receive breakthrough. And then you're going to change your mindset and start seeing the positive and start speaking, positively and praising God and seeing the blessing. And, because we don't want to stay in that place, that mindset of negativity, because, that affects everything around us, but it's okay to have that. But once you bring it to God, then you leave it there at his feet.
Yeah, you bring it to the cross. You let it die there and let resurrection life live in you instead.
That's so good. I was just thinking right now as we're talking about David and these Psalms and kind of where a lot of them come from, and it's Psalm I think it's Psalm 23, right? Well, this is the Passion Translation, so it sounds a little different, but I say this all the time, but right now I just connected in a new way. I said like we might walk through some valleys of shadow of death, but we're not supposed to stay in them. We walk through them. We don't like camp and stay to live in the valley of shadow of death. And it is Psalm 23. King David wrote it. That says that in verse 4, Lord, even when your path takes me through the valley of deepest darkness, fear will never conquer me, for you already have. You remain close to me and lead me through it all the way. Your authority is my strength and my peace. The comfort of your love takes away my fear. I'll never be lonely, for you are near. You become my feast, even when my enemies dare to fight. And so I just realized like that's amazing, because it's speaking about that valley of shadow of death, that dark places that maybe a lot of people are in these places right now. Maybe a lot of people are right now, feeling desperate. I know that I've seen friends, posting comments here and there, from different places saying, I'm scared, I have no idea what's going to happen. What if it's never the same, as in it gets really bad and never gets good again, and like these feelings and thoughts of hopelessness. And King David went through that, and he put it on writing, to remind us, you might go through these valleys, you might go through these dark places, but he's going to lead you through it. And that's what we can count on, because like Maria, you were saying a minute ago, he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. We can count on him that he will never change. We can count on him that he's not shaken. Dan, you were saying that at the beginning, like he's not shaken. His kingdom doesn't move, doesn't fall. Like it's an uncorruptible kingdom.
Yeah. There's no shutdown in his kingdom. There's no quarantine in his kingdom. There's no things aren't, running out in his kingdom. He's good.
Yeah, that's right. There's always, yeah, more than enough. I was gonna say something. I'm like, word comment.
I know what you're gonna say. It's okay.
Oh my goodness.
Oh man, funny. Okay, so Christian Maris, good to see you, man. I love your comments there. That's cool. We miss you, man. We miss you. Can't wait to see you. Amazing worshiper, guitar player. I don't know who else is there because I only see his comment. But if you're watching, just throw a comment in there so we know who it is. Anyways, if any of you have any comments, we'd love to hear. What else? Do you guys have anything else you want to share tonight?
I'm thinking.
I
I feel like
have a
there's.
question.
Go ahead.
I do have a question. I was going to ask you guys this. I can think of sometimes, like when I was saying that worship has brought me through. How has that worked for you guys practically? Maybe, a time in your life, or maybe you remember like the first time that you connected with God in worship and it pulled you through, a situation or something you felt, or maybe it was I don't know, whether before you got married, after you got married, stuff like that. Like I know for me and Kara, that's a big one. And Kara doesn't sing. You guys know that. I mean, she sings, but she does not consider herself like
Right.
a worship leader, singer on the microphone
Sure.
type singer. So I don't know if she's watching right now, but I don't know. But I don't mean that in a bad way. What I mean is she loves worship and she sings out loud, right? But a lot of people, like you were saying earlier, they think that they have to be very super musically oriented to worship. But anyways, Kara is a passionate worshiper, and I know, and I've seen many times, like together or individually, worship has like pulled us through, that the valley of dark place, So can you guys think of something?
I think that for us, I mean, I know for me, because we've led worship for a long time, and so when you're leading worship all the time, you just, life is happening, but you still have to lead worship, right?
Right.
If you're a worship leader, and I feel like we, especially a couple of years ago, I was in just a darker place, just struggling with us not being able to have kids, and so I just was in a really dark place. And so I did take like a couple of weeks off from doing that to find some healing, but it was really hard because I knew that I needed to go back to worship, right? I needed to go back to going into worship, which started at home. But then what I would do, it was really hard for me. It was hard for me. Now, this doesn't matter whether you're on the stage or you're in the congregation, it's all the same. True. Everybody's worshipers. I don't look at anybody differently. I'm not saying that, but this is just my own experience. So I was not feeling necessarily ready, but I went out and did it. And it was like the hardest worship service I'd ever done. And I remember the pastor walked up to me and was like, "Thank you so much for leading worship today." And I said, "That was one of the hardest things I ever did." And he's like, "I know." Like he knew that it was, but when I did that, I received breakthrough. And I feel like the same thing kind of happened more recently, and just feeling like I realized that I was in a place where I was struggling, and this was before all of this happened, but and I really hadn't been leading worship in a while. And then it just like hit me because I had these conversations with God, and I realized, wait a second, the devil's not going to take my worship away also. And that was like a breakthrough moment in my house. It was where I realized that, okay, yeah, this is something that I've been struggling with. I felt depressed. I was just really going through some stuff and fighting through it. And God was helping me and people were helping me. But I felt like, I didn't want to worship in that moment. And that's just the truth. I mean, I didn't want to, but it was like, all of a sudden it just like a light bulb went on, and I was like, wait a second, the devil might have stolen some of my happiness in that moment, but he's not going to also steal my worship. And so then I realized, I was like, no, I need to get back involved in worship. I need to get back involved in worship and my house, at church, like and in order to receive that breakthrough. Once I made that decision, I was able to feel like those chains or that baggage or whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to say, just fall off. And I felt this release, and I realized I felt that darkness just start to fall off, because, the devil didn't have that hold anymore, because he was stopping me, because that is like one of the most powerful things we have, no matter who you are, is your worship. It's the most powerful thing. So the devil's going to give you every excuse possible to not worship, because he's like, if I have him there, then it just, affects our other things. It just starts to trickle down and affect other parts of your life. But if he can't get your worship, then he can't get anything. Really, he can't get a foothold, right? Because that is like such a strong thing. And so for me, I just was like, you're not taking that. And it just like hit me, and I was just like, forget that. And so for me, those are probably the two of the biggest times that I remember, worshiping when I didn't feel like worshiping. And it's like, you might say, oh, but like, you're so good at worship or whatever. It doesn't matter. Like, that's what I'm trying to say, is it doesn't matter whether you're a good singer or a good musician, or it doesn't matter who you are, because I feel like worship comes from your heart. So that's all that, I look for, or I look at. But the truth is that I'm just like, God, these are two big things that I will always remember, because I worshiped even when it was the hardest times of my life. Mm-hmm. And that's when I saw the greatest breakthrough. So, I mean,
so powerful.
Yeah. So that's like, and everybody's story will be different, but it's just like, that is a big deal. And I think that it can be so easy, because I kind of was getting down on myself or being hard on myself, because I knew I should be worshiping, but I wasn't. And it's just like this constant war. But like, that was just, another thing going on in my head. But I felt like, it's not like God ever left me in that time. He was still right there. It's just that I didn't want to.
Just getting reconnected.
Yeah, I didn't. And it was like, do I want to reconnect during this time when I'm feeling really upset and frustrated and down? And then I realized, yes, I have to, because that's the only way I'm going to get true, complete breakthrough.
That is awesome. That's so powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when you're going through something difficult, our tendency is, and the enemy will try to get us to pull away. Like, I'm going to take a step back from God. I'm going to take a step back from my relationship with God, from my devotions, from whatever. And we can feel like, well, I'm going to wait till I'm in a better place, and then I'll come back. But it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. We're like, that whatever that darkness, whatever that thing that you're going through, whatever that stuff that you're dealing with, in the middle of that, coming to God, wherever you're at, whatever condition you're in, I think that's really powerful.
It is. I think Maria, you were saying like, it's almost like if the devil can take your worship away, like he's taken a lot.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I think it's really hard to stay angry while you're singing out, while you're worshiping,
Yeah.
I think it's really hard to stay upset and stay in that hole, if you're worshiping, so I think when the enemy steals our voice or steals our worship, it takes our victory almost like with it. It takes our strength with it, kind of like Ariel.
Yeah, like a Little Mermaid.
Talk about old references. That was back in the days of dial-in radio.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I don't know. I love this. This has been so good. I think honestly, we could probably keep talking about worship for like 12 hours.
Yeah.
Let's do this again, and talk about the different details of worship, and how the word talks about how powerful it is for our life. Maybe some examples of King David, and we'll tell some other personal stories and stuff like that. Maybe like how we worshiped when we were in the mission field, and we definitely were not feeling it
every time.
Yeah,
definitely, because
how we supplied drumsticks from a tree.
But I think that's when God shows up the most, is because it's not us.
Yeah.
And so then if you worship when you're not feeling it, you're going to see that power.
Yeah. And there's nothing glorious about about playing a worship set when you're the setup crew, the teardown crew, and you're surrounded by bugs and mosquitoes. And
You
you don't
slept in a car for 5 consecutive nights.
you don't know if people will even show up or anything or
Yeah.
understand. And yeah, it's those times, man, that it's our history with God, But
Yep.
anyways, fun times. Well, thanks everybody who's been watching. We just wanted to talk a little bit about our passion and our heart for worship, and and how important it is to stay in worship, because I think this culture that we live in today, I think it's so easy to take worship as the Sunday 27-minute fad,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
makes you feel good.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is such a superficial, surfacey, idea, when worship is one of the most powerful, deep things, that we're called to do, that we're created to do and be. So we'll talk more about this stuff in the next few days, maybe next
Sure.
week, and stuff like that. But it's fun. Thank you guys.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no
you're
problem.
welcome.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Anytime.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see you next time, and thanks for watching.